Drop a phone number into an open-source intelligence search, and this is what you usually get: a chaotic cluster of raw, unstructured data points, multiplying without any analytical architecture to hold them together. If you listen to vendor marketing, they promise that a single string of digits will instantly generate a perfectly wrapped, fully actionable dossier. But the reality on the ground looks very different. Ask any professional analyst, and they will tell you that pulling telecommunications data usually results in disorganized, often contradictory data dumps. Intelligence budgets are routinely bled dry purchasing overhyped, unverified tools that output noise instead of signal, causing a massive operational drain. The danger lies in relying on automated aggregation. When we scoop up raw data without subjecting it to strict independent source validation, we ingest the errors along with the facts. The direct consequence of that failure is a flood of false positives, which can entirely compromise a cyber investigation and point teams in the wrong direction. To extract actual value from raw telecommunications data, we have to impose a rigorous structural filter before the analysis even begins. Unchecked open-source intelligence is a liability. It only becomes an asset once it survives a process of hostile analytical auditing. This diagram illustrates the architectural solution, the Comprehensive Intelligence Synthesis Protocol. Watch how the blueprint sweeps away chaotic data clusters, locking information into a rigid grid. Its primary function is translation, forcing an unpredictable query through strict rules, outputting a verified 5-layer briefing. Professional intelligence is not defined by the sheer volume of data you collect. It is defined entirely by the rigidity of the methodology you use to filter it. The protocol begins with a mandatory baseline audit. This dashboard shows the first step: categorizing every piece of input data into strict vendor marketing and neutral technical columns. Before a single piece of data is extracted, we have to assign a baseline trust level to the tool or dataset generating it. This exposes the vendor reality gap, the analytical distance between what a software suite claims it can extract and what is technically possible given the source. Once the sources are audited, we can map the extraction. This topological model places the raw phone number at the absolute center, activating the innermost ring, Layer 1, or infrastructure. Layer 1 isolates carrier and line data. It returns the network identification, country codes, the current active status, and the specific line type, like VoIP versus mobile. Moving outward, the map expands to the second ring, Layer 2, linked accounts. This layer maps the registration history of the phone number, tracing where it has been used to sign up for various digital platforms and applications. Extracting this information relies heavily on querying platform APIs and identifying contact synchronization vulnerabilities across different services. Pushing further from the center brings us to Layer 3, breach exposure. Here, we query massive datasets of leaked information to map any associated email addresses and legacy passwords tied to the target number. The protocol dictates a strict rule here. Analysts must explicitly cite the exact version, date, and provenance of any breached dataset they access. The map then expands to a highly volatile outer ring, Layer 4, public mentions. This involves scraping the open web to locate organic, unstructured instances where the raw number string appears in forums, articles, or digital classifieds. But Layer 4 introduces massive amounts of noise, specifically false positives generated by automated scraped directories and spam lists. To manage this chaos, a persistent audit ledger must run concurrently alongside these expanding layers. The ledger actively enforces contradiction mapping. As data from accounts, breaches, and web mentions accumulates, it will inevitably conflict, and the ledger tracks exactly where those discrepancies occur. Moving outward through these layers increases the sheer volume of data exponentially. Without strict adherence to these auditing rules, that volume turns into intelligence pollution. Finally, we reach the outermost ring, Layer 5, aggregated profile data. This is where the protocol issues its strongest warning. We have to weigh the marketing promises of instant, complete profiling against the reality of the target's actual historical digital footprint. There is a core dependency variable at play. If the owner of a phone number has minimal online activity, the result will be a null return, regardless of how expensive or sophisticated the extraction tool is. A verified null result is a completely valid intelligence outcome. An AI hallucinated or vendor-padded profile generated simply to fill empty space is a catastrophic analytical failure. With the 5 layers mapped, we transition from a static model into the dynamic, chronological workflow mandated by Part 4 of the protocol. The analyst is required to reconstruct their entire methodology as an ordered, step-by-step process. Watch how this flowchart builds itself, locking an inline citation marker securely into every single node. Those markers are non-negotiable. Every single extracted claim within the workflow must carry an inline citation verifying its exact source. The standard is reproducibility. A secondary analyst must be able to follow this documented workflow and reach the exact same conclusions using only the provided sources. This rigorous workflow is what transforms isolated, chaotic data points into a legally and analytically defensible chain of evidence. Once the data is verified, we move out of collection and into the final generation of the briefing document. Part 5 of the protocol governs synthesis. This is the active, critical resolution of the data, rather than just dumping 5 layers of raw text into a PDF. The synthesis documents where sources align. In this wireframe, corroborated data points light up in green, while conflicts trigger a flashing red alert. Analysts explicitly explain these discrepancies, factoring in vendor bias and proactively highlight gaps where expected data is missing. True intelligence synthesis is an act of hostile data auditing. It forces the analyst to prioritize contradiction mapping and gap analysis over comfortable confirmation bias. The final phase is Part 6 of the protocol, the mandatory establishment of operational caveats. This section enforces the strict, non-negotiable boundaries of legal, ethical, and jurisdictional compliance in open-source intelligence gathering. It dictates a rigid rule for handling quarantined claims. Any unverified, single-source claim must be explicitly isolated, flagged, and barred from the main synthesis. The Comprehensive Intelligence Synthesis Protocol acts as the ultimate firewall. It guarantees that final briefings remain technically sound, legally compliant, and immune to outside noise.